Once again, we're talking about K-Pop Demon Hunters, this time touching on a topic that actually sort of surprised me, to tell you the truth, but I've seen it popping up a bit in the comments on some of my other videos, and so I figured I could address it now. In the last couple of weeks, I've talked about the future of the franchise and what they could do in future movies, since the popularity of the original film makes it something that's tailor-made to become an ongoing franchise. In this era where animated sequels are all the rage, when you stumble upon original content that actually blows up and becomes super popular, you'd be a fool to turn away from it. As a part of those videos, I repeatedly mentioned that at the end of the film, the Hunters were able to use their power to turn the Honmoon gold and shut the demon realm off forever. However, in a bunch of different comments, I've had people dispute that and mention that there's a chance that not everything's as it seems. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We'll look into this little theory and see if it has any sort of basis in reality, and then try to figure out what it can mean for the franchise going forward. What role could it play in influencing the narrative of future sequels, and could it have an impact on character arcs and relationships, etc, etc. That's what we're going to get stuck into today. Feels like it does have a little bit of an overlap with my video talking about potential sequel ideas, but to tell you the truth, I hadn't thought about this topic at the time. It legit only came to me when people started commenting on my previous videos about how the Honmoon isn't gold. Somehow it just didn't register for me on that first watch through. I think I must have just gotten caught up in the moment of watching the epicness of the scene, and then the song's blasting and it's all so glorious, I got swept up in it. I mean, here's a confession for you if you want. I went back for this video to take a look at the final song and I sat through it all, and once again, I got swept up in the moment. I sat there all the way to the credits before realizing I hadn't been paying attention to the color of the Honmoon. I was just enjoying the movie. So of course, I had to go back and watch it again in full, and this went on for some time. But now I reckon we need to start off with some recap, right? Just to get ourselves where we need to be. The world of K-Pop Demon Hunters revolves around the idea that there are secretly demons that inhabit the world. Once humans, over time they've been overcome by the promise of power, wealth, and privilege offered by the demon king Guima, a mysterious, fiery figure who seems to lack any sort of corporeal form at all, likely hinting that he was never a human ever. He's just a demon of some sort. As with all deals with the devil, the good times never last for long, and eventually these empowered people are pulled into his service as demons for all eternity, and have to go out into the world to hunt souls in his name, preying upon innocent humans to do so. This is all supposed to have largely happened a long time ago, and it was a time of fear and despair. In response to this demonic menace arose an order of demon hunters, a trio of women who would go out into the world and hunt them with magical weapons and supernatural combat abilities, whilst also singing songs that would inspire the people they were protecting. This forged a magical barrier between the demon and human realms known as the Honmoon. The barrier over time would become harder and harder to penetrate as the power of the Honmoon grew with each generation, because more and more people would be inspired by the songs of the Slayers, and presumably not only refresh its strength, but make it stronger than it ever was before. This meant that eventually the knowledge of the demons, and that there were demon hunters to begin with, would fall into legend and become more akin to fairy tales. After all, why wouldn't they? As the Honmoon gets stronger, less demons will appear. With less demons means more chances for said demons to be slain, and so they'd have to hide somewhat to be able to take souls and avoid notice from any hunters that might be out to get them. At the same time, the hunters would simply become known as singers with each passing generation, because as the demons go underground, the hunters gain the upper hand, and so they have more time to dedicate to performance and maintaining the Honmoon, whilst their fights with demons become more incognito. This is the status quo until we come to the present day of the story, where the latest trio are known as Huntrix, consisting of Rumi, Mira, and Zoe. The trio have almost fully succeeded in turning the Honmoon gold, which is said to completely shut off the realms forever, preventing demons from crossing over, and removing Rumi's demonic markings, which I suppose implies that they'd also ensure that any demon lucky enough to avoid getting locked away, likely only possible if they turned good like Genu did at the end right there before he died, would probably cease to be a demon and become a human instead, right? Just spitballing here. Regardless, I presume the reason they're able to turn the Honmoon gold is because they've become mega famous and just completed a world tour, which has ensured their music's popular enough to turn that Honmoon gold with one last push. From what I understand, it seems their connection with the fans and the love they bear for the trio is supposed to be what powers the Honmoon, right? Although, maybe them being worldwide sensations has nothing to do with it. Maybe it's just compounding on the strength of the Honmoon that's been built up over generations? As after all, the Saja Boys only really exist in one city for like a couple of days max, and get so popular that they easily punch through the Honmoon. Surely they couldn't overpower everything the girls had achieved if it took into account every single fan of Huntrix across the world, right? I'm probably thinking into this more deeply than the writers ever did. I probably just got to accept what happens on screen and not dig too deeply into that one. Anyway, they're on the cusp of total victory, which they think is going to be with the release and performance of Golden, their brand new single Rumi plans to shadow drop in the early stages of the movie. Of course, it doesn't all go to plan, as after they drop the single, their scheduled performance which will ignite the Honmoon is cancelled due to Rumi's secret demonic markings damaging her voice, and thus forcing her to seek alternative treatments to try to get through it. Usually, I would give the side eye to someone and go to see some pseudo-scientific quack to give you weird tonics, but considering she is afflicted by supernatural markings spreading across her entire body that she inherited from her demonic dad's DNA, something tells me conventional medicine would have been just as useless. but also would have attracted way more attention. Regardless, all of this drama leads to their big triumphant moment being delayed, and in turn gives the demons a chance to counterattack. Thus, enter Genu and the Saja boys, who start to take away some of that fan support by becoming the next big thing and being all impressive. Of course, they have to use a bit of magic to get people on side, since they really do go from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. Of course, this means that slowly but surely, the Saja boys are able to poke holes in the Honmoon, and this allows more and more demons to slip into the world and start stealing souls for Guima. Genu and Rumi interact, and there's all the romance and manipulation and all that jazz, which leads to Rumi having her big moment where she challenges Guima with her new song. Genu sacrifices himself to save her, whilst also giving her his soul. And then Huntrix gets back together to banish Guima's big purple ass back to the Shadow Realm. And Rumi's patterns disappear forever, and she's a pure human now, and the Honmoon turns gold. Hooray! But wait, that's not actually what happened, is it? Her patterns don't go away at all, they just fade. They're no longer malevolently glowing a nice shade of Guima purple. The Honmoon itself doesn't go gold at all. I'm pretty sure it just goes back to being regular blue. And then Guima as well. I said he gets banished, but are we sure he isn't straight up dead? Like, they hit his ass with what seemed to be a spirit bomb from Dragon Ball, where they get everybody's energy and power as they all sing the song with Huntrix, and then they drop it on him and he gets absolutely ethered. There's no, I'll get you for this, no long protracted, no! He just vanishes. He's gone. Regardless of what actually happened here, the girls seem to think that everything's over and done with, and that the demons are not going to be coming back. Of course, this seems to be an unlikely thing considering the popularity of the franchise, which could lead into more sequels, all of which would likely bear the name K-Pop Demon Hunters. As I said in a previous video, now you've named it this, all the others kind of have to follow that scheme and either add a subheading or a numeral to set it apart. Unless they go full crazy and just keep the K-pop part and have them hunt anything. Werewolves, ghosts. To be honest, I would watch K-pop Werewolf Hunters and K-pop Ghost Hunters. Anyway, maybe I am misinterpreting things, but since they made such a big deal about it going gold and then it doesn't, you could argue this was an intentional creative choice. And if that's the case, then I think that in the end, not turning it gold is definitely the right decision. The reality is that it leaves things way more open for future storytelling, at least in regards to Guima. Well, unless the creation of their brand new Honmoon was meant to be the equivalent of it going gold, and it's meant to be sealed away forever, in which case, whoopsie, you've accidentally killed off a potential story thread you could have pulled on in a later film. Then again though, I don't actually think that they explicitly state anything about what happened, right? So you could always just explain it away as being, oh well, they thought that it meant they'd be sealed off for good, but actually they aren't. Easy peasy, that's all you need. It's a little bit of a flimsy excuse, but have a dramatic song after that and I guarantee nobody's going to question you. This in turn begs the question though, what does this mean for the franchise going forward? How would this impact the way the narrative's going to continue to play out? In essence, what happens next? Where does the story go from here, and is there a way to work through it? Or work it into the overarching storyline? Okay, so there are probably a couple of ways to take this story. The most likely, of course, being that at some point there's clearly going to be demons that are coming through into the world again at the behest of Guima, or somebody who's replaced him if he is actually dead. Although, if he is dead, does that mean there are no more demons at all? Or would the demons that he created simply lose their power? What's going on? But yes, the first idea, if he is alive and, well, not alive and well, but probably somewhat injured and still in existence out in the world, you'd have to decide whether the Honmoon is actually in place properly. We know from the movie that if it is gold, the demons are sealed away forever. We also know that the current one is not gold, but yet the demons are still sealed away, the big fella got banished or killed, and the markings have somewhat faded. Thus, the narrative clearly intends for this to be a very strong barrier nonetheless. So if Guima still exists, would it not seem a bit strange for him to suddenly be able to burst into the human realm in the sequel film? Yes. Yes, it would. It would 100% cheapen and trivialize that big moment at the end of the first movie. Thus, if Guima still exists, either you have to hold off on him coming back for round 2 until a third film, and you have to think of an original villain to fight in the sequel. I've had ideas about that in previous videos, so I won't deep dive too much into that now, although I will just briefly say that this is a good way to somehow tie things back to her dad and the origin of her markings. Another thing I've just thought about is that you could easily play into this idea of there being proper demon worshippers amongst normal humans who still believe they can bring down the Honmoon and free Guima since it ain't golden and thus it's vulnerable. Or if you really want to have the hunters fight Guima again, for even more closure, you could go for broke and have them take the fight to him. And why would they do this? Why would they enter the demon realm? I don't know. I'm sure we could think of any number of reasons. But how about this one? Rumi's vibing with Genu. Genu died at the end of the movie. We all know we need more of that romance arc. His soul was apparently given to Rumi and he was finally free of Guima, but what if there's some way for him to come back to life, but in order to do so, they need something from Guima's realm, or there's a tiny fragment of his soul still left there? Who knows? That's one reason they could go full Doomslayer and dive into the hells to fight demons. I'm sure you could think of any other reason, comedic or dramatic, that would also work quite well. I just needed a way to shoehorn my boy into the film. We need him back.
Please come back.
Like I said though, all of those ideas would only be relevant if Guimar's still alive as of the end of the movie. If he isn't, it's a moot point, because you could easily invent a fresh villain that would somehow be strong enough to bust out of the Honmoon, whether it's golden or not, and you could very easily explain that away as him being very strong. Otherwise, it just does feel like a plot point that is very Guimar coded, and without him, it kind of has no meaning anymore. Like how Poe and the Dragon Scroll really only matter in the first Kung Fu Panda movie before things start to go in different directions for the sequels and follow different story beats. Thus, did the Honmoon go gold? It doesn't look like it, does it? Is Guimar gone? Maybe. Are the demons gone? Almost certainly not, because then we have no story. Might not be the same demons you come to expect from the first film, but they're going to be there. Who's to say there's only going to be one source of demons after all? Regardless though, I think that's enough rambling for now, and so I'll just remind you that these have all been my opinions, and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of everything we've talked about today? Did any of it make sense to you? Maybe not. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.